Hey guys, my name is Haley and today I'm going to be filming a slightly different kind of video than what I usually do on here. My favorite musicals. Musicals and theater is something I'm very passionate about, and I'm gonna share some of my favorites with you guys. Coming in at number 10 is Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. There's a theater near where I live that does this show, a community theater that does this show every single year from September to December. And then there's a month-long chunk of shows that runs from Thanksgiving to Christmas. I was in this show for 4 years in a row. If you don't know, it's a musical written by Andrew Lloyd Webber, which, as you'll see as we continue with this list, is probably my favorite musical composer. I have one of my Joseph t-shirts. I have 4 of these. I went and saw the show the year before I was in it, and then I was in it for 4 years, and then I went and saw it for 3 years after I was in it, and then I went and saw it at a professional production when it toured a couple years ago, which is what this is from. And I just love the show so much. It's so weird, it's so random, it has so many different kinds of music thrown in there, and it's just one of the most fun shows to perform, and it's always a blast for me to go see it. Coming in at number 9 is Children of Eden. This show is another show that I was in, and that's how I found out about it. A friend of mine who I did Joseph with and had done a couple of other shows with found a community theater around here that was doing a production of Children of Eden, so we went and found the soundtrack. I fell in love with the soundtrack, and then we went and auditioned. We both got callbacks for it. My friend actually ended up being the male lead in it, so I love the music in this show so much, and I loved the cast that we had. If you don't know, Children of Eden was written by the same guy, Stephen Schwartz, who wrote Wicked, which I'm sure if you're a fan of musicals at all, you've listened to Wicked. So you know how good that soundtrack is, and this one I think is just as good. It's got such a good storyline. It's just got such a special place in my heart. I love the music so much. There's so many good songs in this show, and if you've never listened to it or you've never even heard of it, because I don't think it was ever on Broadway, not that I'm aware of, but it's such a good show, and I would highly recommend it. Next on the list is one of the shows. There are a few in my top favorite shows that I've never actually seen live because I'm a terrible theater person. Coming in at number 8 is Spring Awakening. Fun little tidbit, I found the pilot episode of Glee back when it first came out in, I think it was like 2008, 2009, somewhere around there. And I watched it. Loved Lea Michele, so I started searching on the internet of everything to do with her and everything she'd ever been in because I thought she was amazing. And I found a bootleg, for if you don't know is an illegal recording, of Spring Awakening with the original cast, including her as Wendla, the lead girl, and Jonathan Groff as Melchior. And this is where my love for Jonathan Groff started. He's just one of my favorite actors of all time. I fell in love with both of those actors, and I fell in love with the music of this show. It's a very emotional, sad, depressing, but very well written and performed show, and I would definitely recommend it if you can handle a little bit of like PG-13-ness, because yeah. Coming in at number 7 is Wicked. This is another show that I have yet to see because I'm awful and it always sells out when it comes here. It either sells out or the tickets are like $1 million and then it sells out. So I've never actually seen it live, but I am actually remedying that in a couple weeks. Me and my friend just bought tickets to go see it. And I am so excited because this has been one of my favorite shows since I was like 13 or 14 when I first started getting into like listening to musical soundtracks regularly. Wicked is just honestly most people's one of their favorite musicals just because it's phenomenal. I'm just so happy to finally be seeing one of my favorite musicals live because I know that soundtrack like the back of my hand. Coming in at number 6 is The Phantom of the Opera. If this playbill looks familiar to you, this is the one and only show that I have seen on Broadway, like in the Broadway theater. The only time I've been to New York, we went and saw this show. It is phenomenal live. I will tell you that right now. It's another Andrew Lloyd Webber show, which, as I've said, he's one of my favorite composers of all time. I don't think there's a whole lot of people who don't know what this is about, so I don't know if I'm gonna go into a synopsis of it, but next up we have Les Miserables. This is another show that I was actually in. I was in a school edition version of it at a community theater near me. I did see this professionally done at a theater that is the theater district near me, and I cried like a baby. That's what this playbill is from, but it's just one of my favorite shows. It has one of the most moving soundtracks that I've ever heard in my life, and I get so emotional watching it every time. I'm sorry if I'm doing a really bad job of explaining my favorites, but my throat hurts really bad and I don't feel good. So maybe I'll elaborate more on some of these. If you would like me to elaborate on why I love any of these shows, leave a comment down below and let me know, because I can do that. Just having a rough day. Coming in at number 4 on my list is Next to Normal. This is a sort of lesser known show, I think, from what I've gathered. I've never seen this one live, and it makes me so sad because it's so high up on my favorite musicals list because I love the soundtrack. Again, I have seen a bootleg of it somewhere on the internet. Judge me. And the original Broadway cast soundtrack of this show has some of my absolute favorite actors, like Broadway actors in it. It's got Brian Darcy James, it's got Aaron Tveit, Jen Damiano, Adam Chandler Barrett. I forget how to pronounce his name, but I just love all of the actors that are in this show. The music is just incredible, the storyline is incredible. If for those of you who have no idea what this show is, it has to do with mental illness. The mom has bipolar depressive disorder, I believe it is, and a lot of other issues, but it's such an it's a cast of only 8 people, which is very, very unusual for a lot of Broadway shows. If you ever get the chance to go see it, if it ever tours, if a community theater ever does it near you, I would definitely recommend going to see it, and I wish somebody around here would do it so I can go see it. For now, I'll just be living through bootlegs and the soundtrack, like I have been for many years. And now we're getting into my top 3, and I'm gonna preface this by saying you will see, or you might see, a little bit of a trend with my top 3 is I like musicals that are very, very different from most musical theater shows that you see on Broadway, in the sense that they change the game of Broadway in some way. My number 3 slot goes to Cats. I know there are a lot of people that make fun of this show. I know it's a very weird show for people that are not familiar with theater at all. This show was the very first musical I ever saw. I saw it when my mom bought me the VHS tape. Back in 1998, I was 5 years old. She bought the VHS tape of Cats the Musical, which is another show written by Andrew Lloyd Webber. That's another reason he's one of my favorite composers. I literally watched that VHS tape so many times that it is broken. It doesn't work anymore. And it was also the very first show that I ever saw live. Like, I'd grown up watching the Cats the Musical VHS tape and then the DVD when I broke the VHS tape. But somehow I never comprehended that you could actually go see musicals live in like a theater. Like, my little 5-year-old brain didn't comprehend that until I was 11, and my mom bought us tickets to Cats at a dinner theater nearby where we live, and we were front row. There were people dressed as cats all over the stage. We were probably about 4 or 5 feet from the stage. And it was literally the most magical experience of my life. Like, I had never been so excited to be somewhere. And I still to this day can remember bits and pieces of that show, because everybody remembers the first show that they've ever seen live. And like, I got to meet some of the cast. I met some of the cast. They signed my little poster. As you can see, this poster is very old. It's from when I was like 11. But for the longest time, the only show I ever saw live was Cats. I've actually seen Cats live 3 times, and it was all within the space of like 3 years, like every time it toured, we would go see it because my family actually really enjoys it as well because they grew up with me watching it constantly. I was so excited to see that there's a Broadway revival happening of Cats on Broadway right now. It just opened the end of July. I've been following the vlogs on Broadway.com of the new cast, and I want to see it so bad. You have no idea. Because that's the show that got me into musicals, and very few things have ever topped that show as one of my favorites, even though it's really hard to explain to people when you're trying to explain, like, oh, that's one of your favorite shows. Why? But, like, there's a reason the show was one of the longest running shows on Broadway. It ran for 18 years. It is the 4th longest running show on Broadway. It will always hold a very special place in my heart, and I've never been able to dock it out of my top 3. It's also a show that really kind of changed the game for Broadway back in like the 80s when it first came out, because the reason it ran for so long is because nobody had ever seen anything like that before. Like, it wasn't the regular, but it has such a beautiful score and soundtrack and just incredible choreography that people that go see it for the most part can't help but love it because it's so different. Coming in at number 2, I know you know this one was coming if you've been watching my channel at all for the last couple of months. That would be Hamilton. This show, for good reason, has just blown up all over the world. It's something that everybody's talking about. People that don't even like theater or even really know anything about theater have found it and loved it and just fallen in love with the soundtrack. And that's because it's something so different for Broadway. It revolutionized hip-hop into musical theater, which is something that has never been done before. Lin has done such a good job with creating these well-rounded characters of people that actually existed and helped found our country, and it's just an incredible piece of art, to be completely honest. I get really emotional about this show because I'm just honestly so impressed with the soundtrack. I'm so impressed with the characters. I'm so impressed with Lin as a person, because I was sort of familiar with his previous show, In the Heights. Like, there were a couple of songs from it that I remember really loving back in the day when In the Heights won a bunch of its Tony Awards. But this show has literally taken the world by storm, and it has completely changed the game for musical theater in the last year alone since it's been on Broadway. It's one of those shows that you just know is gonna be there for a really long time. And I fell in love with it the same way everybody else in the world did, even though I was a little bit late to the bandwagon. And then finally, we have Rent by Jonathan Larson. This was the very first show outside of Cats that I had ever seen. My mom bought the DVD of the 2005 movie with a lot of the original Broadway cast was in the movie. Rent has one of the most moving storylines I've ever seen in any show, any movie, anything ever. It's something that's always just stuck with me and just always tears at my heartstrings no matter how many times I see it, with the motto of the show is "No Day But Today." And the soundtrack is just, it's not even the most incredible score you've ever heard. It's just the lyrics are so moving and so true and so prevalent to life as it was in the 90s and the early 2000s when this show was on Broadway. And even today, I have seen it live 3 times. I saw it, which is one of the crowning moments of my musical moments of my life. I saw it live, 3rd row, with Anthony Rapp and Adam Pascal. If you don't know, are the original Broadway Mark and Roger. Roger is my favorite character in the show, so that was literally the most magical moment that I've had to date of a show that I've seen live. And I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. But Rent I don't think, as much as I love Hamilton, as much as I love Cats, I don't think anything will ever knock Rent out of its #1 spot in my heart and in my list of favorite things ever. And I love it so much. Sorry, I'm doing a really bad job of explaining these. This is not a good day for filming. Those are my favorite musicals of all time. If you have any video ideas for things to do with musical theater, if there's anything you want to ask me, just leave a question down below in the comments, and I will see you next time.